Welcome to the Outer Realm with Michelle DeRoche and Amelia Pisano. Airing live on the United Public Radio Network, 105.3 FM in New Orleans.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Wednesday night segment of The Outer Realm. We are broadcasting live here on the United Public Radio Network 105.3 FM from New Orleans. We are fully sponsored by the amazing people over at Folgers Coffee who have been with us since day one. So thank you, Folgers. Big thank you to Dr. Snick, aka Justin Snicker, the sonic surgeon, for his sponsorship of our intro and our outro. He is an award-winning composer of Halloween, horror, sci-fi, and dark wave electronic music, which can be found on anywhere where you can find good music: Bandcamp, Spotify, iTunes, Amazon, you name it. So thank you. Tonight, we welcome back Ryan Musgrave Evans, who will continue his discussion on crypto-terrestrials, ET, prophecies, just odd connections, his new book. It all sounds pretty exciting. In order to participate on the show tonight, we are airing on, I'm going to have to read this, UFO Paranormal Radio on YouTube, International Public Radio on YouTube. We're going to head over to Facebook, Canada's Most Haunted. Of course, The Outer Realm, Joe Montaldo, UFO Undercover, News on the Flip Side, and UFO Paranormal Radio, United Public Radio. While you are over there, please not just subscribe, but get a membership at UFO Paranormal Radio, because there's a whole lot of content that's being added pretty much on a regular basis, with a whole lot more coming. The hosts have all these great ideas that they're going to be doing just for members. So you're not going to see it if you don't get a membership. I know the Gray Zone Uncensored that Joe and I do every week. I'm sorry. It's only for members. It always has been. It's why you cannot find it. So with that being said, I see the chat room is filling up. First one that takes it, Doreen. Hello.
Before we even got on. Hello.
Wayne Zachman.
Yeah. Hi, Wayne. Hi, Zach.
Yeah, outstanding. So very, very good. So how are you?
You don't sound good.
Better than me. No, a little bit of a scratchy throat. Just the cold, the rain, the warm. So I'm really feeling it.
Hi, Dave. Yeah, you were outside.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's why. Literally outside. She was working outside. So
it's been great. It's been great. Just being outside in this topsy-turvy weather has been difficult, but yeah. Not as much as poor Wayne, out there in torrential rains, and I've tried to avoid that because of my hair.
Remember that with red hair. I remember that. It's funny.
Exactly. It's just
when I was washing my hair today, I forgot how nice it is to wash your hair in warm water.
Right.
Because when you have red hair, you wash your hair in freezing cold water.
Oh, that was today. Brain freeze from the outside. It was delightful.
Yeah.
I'm with
Hi,
you,
Blackie.
Right?
Yeah.
Oh, hey, Tamara.
Pretty much Raven. Just saying Jet, not Blackie, but
Blackie
said that you need puppy.
Mm-hmm.
Joe.
Say quiet.
Joe.
Warmer weather.
Yeah.
Yes, Jack. We're with you on the warmer weather. Honestly,
I like all the seasons. Am I the only one?
You're a weirdo.
I know I am a weirdo. I am, and I hang out with fellow weirdos, but
in a good way.
Yes, definitely in a good way. Before we introduce, I just want to say something, because I'm watching the Supernatural series for the umpteenth time. I'm not even going to admit how many times I've watched that series.
Right.
And I'm watching this, and I know I'm into season 2 or something, because I skip a lot of episodes. The bonus of having seen it once, you get to skip the ones that were meh. when you were watching them first time. So I'm watching this and they're going to burn bones. And I'm thinking,
I know that episode.
People think we do this. I know there is people out there
do not go burning
that
bones.
think that we go into graves and burn bones.
I keep my bones.
No, like there's so much because television sometimes becomes a little bit more real to some than others. And
it's true.
I just want to say, it is a little extra. I just want to say it's entertainment. And no, we don't burn bones. Like I've been accused of a lot of things, but
not burning bones. You can come and check out my cabinet. It's full of bones. Well,
yeah, that's hers, not mine. Mine's got creepy dolls, but
real
so
things.
Just we don't burn bones. That's all I'm saying. Not everything. Yeah. There's a lot of realism in supernatural, but there's a lot of entertainment too. The
pie, for example. The pie addiction can be a good thing too. So
they have a book. How to make their pies. I'm like, there isn't a book someone will not make. Pies and burgers of the supernatural. They actually have a book.
I love it. I do.
Yeah.
It's hilarious.
Yeah. I laughed at that one. Actually, I have a friend who is crazy about Downton Abbey. Is that how you pronounce it? Downton Abbey? I've never seen it, but she's crazy about it. Yeah. So one year for her, as a gift, I bought her the complete cookbook. They have a holiday one. They have one of the movie. They have like all the menus there and how to make the food. I'm like, wow. I don't know too many people that are eating pheasant besides the royals, but just in case.
Just in case.
Just in case.
All right. Yeah. So why don't we get to short bio?
Yeah. Yes, definitely.
And we'll bring our guest on.
Returning guests, because when they're returning guests, it's because they have so much knowledge that they still need to share with all of us. So we're very fortunate that way.
It's true.
So I'm just going to give a recap for those of you who are meeting Ryan Musgrave Evans for the first time tonight. He is an author. He has a diploma in teaching, a BA with first class honors in philosophy, private language tutor, full-time nursery, and grafter, with an insatiable preoccupation with linguistics, philosophy, folklore, religion studies, and all things paranormal. So please welcome back Ryan Musgrave Evans.
And a whole lot more, just then we'd be here for a little bit longer.
A lot of accreditations. You have to go, hi, how are you, Ryan?
Hi. Hey, Mark.
G'day.
Hey,
Thanks for having me back.
Oh, it's our pleasure. We had a lot of fun the last time you were on, and it was tough because we're sort of like, the time goes by so fast. We're like already. So,
that's right.
How are you?
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, I'm doing great.
Summer there.
All the way from Sydney, people. See,
it's summer in Australia. Just saying.
Yeah. It's a bit muggy here. It's pretty warm.
Oh wow, I bet.
And to keep out all the ambient noise from outside, I've got the window closed and the door closed.
Oh, so no.
Oh, you don't have to do that for us. Don't melt. Yeah, we'd rather you not faint during the show.
Next thing you know, Ryan drops.
Yeah, that's right. I should have had the foresight to bring a fan in here.
Yes.
But anyway,
would you like to go get one?
Yeah.
Always would you like to go get one? We can just...
Oh, no. That's okay. That's okay. We'll be right. I'll forge on.
I loved reading your because you like Canada, like you spell honor Honour. So I can always tell when there's an American guest, because it just automatically goes to OR, right? In the spelling.
That's right. Yeah, and color, I think as well. There's a few other ones.
There's few. There's attorney, neighborhood, honors. There's a few of them because autocorrect goes right automatically to change it when I'm typing on my laptop, and it drives me insane.
I correct it when it goes on.
So do I, because if I'm catching it, if I'm not speaking it and I'm typing it, I will correct it. It drives me crazy because it's incorrectly spelled for us. Hi, Jamie.
Well, it's all different. It's all different.
Riga says, good morning, Ryan.
Oh, good morning. Good morning. Yeah, the American system is simpler, I suppose. It's at some stage there's been some overhaul. I don't know the history of it. Do you guys? Where at some stage America's decided they're going to patch up the older spelling system and take out some silent letters, and
they're rebels.
I don't know. I think they're the only ones, though. Just like the metric system, they're the only ones.
They're not. Yeah,
they're still an imperial. They're the only country in the world that's still an imperial, because I know when you're exporting to them, it becomes an issue because you have to change all the kilograms to pounds on products, and it becomes a huge issue.
Our American friends go to the beat of their own drum. So, which is A-okay. So,
yeah, Zach wrote, in the USA, we threw out the U with the
T. With the T in the Boston Harbor. There we go.
Is that what happened? Because Zach was a teacher. Is that what happened? Do you know how it happened, Zach? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But you're also still in pounds, which is really bizarre.
Right.
I'm in the middle because we switched from imperial to metric while I was in elementary school. So, and that's another thing. They say primary school. They don't say elementary school.
Mm.
Oh, yeah, we say primary. Yeah.
Yeah.
In Australia, primary.
We're same.
Okay, cool, yeah.
We're all part of the Commonwealth. We're the same.
We say as well, we say, like for years I was what we would have called a relief teacher.
Yes.
In America, it's
substitute. We say substitute as well.
Substitute, okay, right.
Yes. So fun times. So what have you been up to? What have you been up to since the last time we spoke? I know you're in the middle of a lot of different research, which we will ask you to recap a little bit on the crypto terrestrial thing. But before that,
well, I've been writing another book. So the first book that was published by Flying Disc Press, Children of Orion, that I was talking about last time. Philip Mantle. I'm indebted to the guy. He's said he's taking on my second book as well, which is
he's awesome.
Like half finished. Early next year he'll publish that.
Very
the title is tentative at best at the moment, so I won't divulge the title because it's probably going to change 5 times before.
Okay, we won't hold you to it.
But lots of research into that kind of thing, and particularly in that book, I'm planning on talking a fair bit about the language of the what are called the Mudgeonor, or the tall whites, the Orions, the beings that I've known since I was a kid, and going into a lot of detail about that, which is something I hardly touched on at all in the first book. So that's going to take up a chunk of the second book.
I am so curious about the language because I've had my own personal experiences with ET, and you hear all kinds of different things and you're not really sure what it is, because usually they're telepathic.
Oh, that's true as well. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So how do you know?
They've spoken to me sometimes, like visiting me actually in the flesh, in person, speaking at me, even though I don't understand it. So I understand pieces of it now, and this is what I'm engaged in trying to work out. So at least even some of the basics of the structure of it, of the grammar and things like that. But they're incredible mimics, and of course they can speak. Many of them are just multilingual, polyglots. Some of them aren't necessarily. Some of them, but they're all going to be able to speak English for the most part, and other major world languages, the ones that are here currently. Subterranean dwelling, crypto-terrestrials, I call them, taking the name from Mactones, who decided, who formulated that theory, the crypto-terrestrial hypothesis about the beings behind the UFO phenomenon, the abduction phenomenon, being indigenous to this Earth rather than extraterrestrials. And so this is true. I agree with him. So I use his term to describe these particular beings that I've known. But the language, sounds to the ear, to the Western ear anyway, very much like Japanese or Korean.
I've heard that, or Inuit.
Really?
Inuit, maybe, with sort of monosyllabic, very broken up words are monosyllables, and no word seems to end with a consonant. Always ends with a vowel. Like, when...
So they're Italian?
Like Italian does that a bit too, with the O's and the A's if it's masculine.
Mind you, the further north you get, we end on a consonant.
Oh, really?
Believe it or not, in Italy, yes. The Northerners will end without the vowel. They'll often end on an N, a T, a D. Yeah.
Oh, that's really interesting.
They're mix of Croatia and Slavic and Swiss and French, right?
So that's influencing them. Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
So
these guys, they, like sort of like Japanese, where when the Japanese, when they're borrowing words into their own language, they might, not really have a word exactly identical to the English word salad, and so they say salada. When they borrow it over into their language, they feel like Italian people sometimes do, or whatever. They add that extra thing on the end. Well, the Orions or Mudgeon, whatever you want to call them, seem to do that kind of thing as well. But for the most part, they speak to you and into your head in a telepathic kind of way, your native language. Or if you have several native languages, maybe a mixture of the two, where there's sort of code switching with you depending on what language they think's more appropriate for the experience or whatever. So sometimes they talk to me in English in my head, sometimes Gaelic, Scots Gaelic. I've started learning about 20 years ago, and I'm fluent, and I speak it to my kids and my wife. But
nice.
They speak
like
to
that.
me.
It's hard to learn.
It's very hard. Very.
Yes.
Yeah.
So tell me,
It is.
In sounds, like just backing up a minute to syllables and things like that, some people will say, and this is what I've heard, it's almost like, you know how dolphins will do this clacking or clicking sounds, like
yes, for sure. That's part of their what I've called camo cant, or like camouflage speech, where they seem to have different codes, where they have a language that they speak rarely when they're around people. People don't often hear this, but the Japanese sounding language I was talking about before.
That's
but
what
they're
more
likely if you hear them speaking to each other to be speaking like a mixture of clicks and whistles and growls and barks. And there seems to be some kind of continuum where they
growls is interesting.
That is very interesting because that is always and almost often related to demonic.
That's right. Yeah. Well, I think they've given rise to a lot of people's like beliefs in demonic as well as angelic things going on in the world.
I never would have pictured a tall white or gray growling. They just seem. I would expect it more from a reptilian, for example, and maybe that's being stereotypical. And maybe you can clarify or clear up.
If in Charles Hall that wrote the Millennial Hospitality series of books, his memoirs, he was stationed in the United States Air Force in the 60s at Nellis Air Force Base, and he was a weather observer at Indian Springs. He'd drive out into the desert where there was a little weather shack on the ranges there, and he had a theodolite with him, and he'd release balloons into the sky, and he'd track the distance, the speed, and the direction of wind, and call it back in. Basically, that was his task. But while he was out there, he was posted there for 2 years. When he'd go out into the desert there, now this is in the Area 51, of course, is in part of the Greater Nellis Air Force Base, so it's there in Nevada. So he was not overly far away from what would be called Area 51. But in the Indian Spring Mountains there, he said that there was a tall, fair race of beings with fine white hair, eyes 2 to 3 times the size of our own that wrap further around the sides of their heads, much less prominent nose, ears, but not as prominent as ours, pointed faces, incredibly thin. Most of the members of their race are emaciated, really ectomorphic in build, so they're just painfully thin. When we look at them, we think they look like they're sickly, but that's them. And he describes them as growling and barking, and also whinnying like a horse sometimes.
And listen to that more.
Yeah, this was the language as he described it, and he said they'd sometimes use sounds that were higher and lower than human ear could detect. But for the most part, to him, that sounded like coyotes out in the brush, mixed with sometimes horses and meadowlarks. The chirping and twittering of meadowlarks, which he thought was meadowlarks.
I'm like dumbfounded here. I've never heard any of this.
I've heard that. I have.
He coined the term tall white. Before Charles Hall's books, people didn't call any ET or non-human race tall whites. The term Nordics was in use for tall, fair ET beings, and had been for a long time. And it seemed to be like a slang from the intelligence community for the tall, fair beings that then sort of spread out into the UFO community as well as a sort of a term for them, because superficially they kind of look like Scandinavian people maybe. But the tall whites are quite unusual looking. Really, they don't look like, Scandinavian supermodels or something like that. You wouldn't, for them to pass as us in public, they'd have to be wearing a lot of clothes to bulk themselves out. They'd have to be not overly old, because the older they get, the taller they get. They take about 100 years to reach 6 foot. But once they get to like 300 years old, 4, 5, they shoot up. They can live as long as 700 or 800 years, by which time they can be 9 to 10 foot tall. What? So if they want to pass as us in public, they have to be doing it earlier on in their lives. Right. And they'd have to be wearing dirty big glasses, sunglasses, wigs, because their hair is fine and sort of strange looking. They'd have to have something on their hands because they have 4 long, very, very long fingers, a tiny vestigial thumb further up their hand, and their hands are very long, elongated, and a line down their palm that folds over so that their 4 fingers can be prehensile and oppose each other, as we would have opposable thumbs. But this is so the weirdest things about them are their huge eyes and their hands. So they're often careful to cover and these kinds of things. But if they're wearing wigs and they can have their telepath tech, what I call telepath tech, what Charles Hall called electronics, where they're not any naturally more psychic or telepathic than we are. They rely on nuts and bolts technologies that they wear in helmets, and they require a huge amount of training to be able to have the skill to use it, to speak into other people's minds, to read other people's thoughts, to influence people, to send abstract thoughts, influence people to do acts, to wipe people's memories, and these kinds of things. They start from very young and train to be able to use these kinds of technologies. But if they're wearing one of these things, they can wear a wig over it. And Charles Hall describes seeing what he thought were tall whites in casinos in Las Vegas.
All places.
They would be able to hide very easily there. I'm just saying, there in Manhattan would be, or in Toronto, downtown Toronto. Sorry, my kin, but
well, with all the weird and wonderful members of the human race there already. Yes.
Wow. Cool. So in communication, because this is, I've heard some of the things you're talking about. My last house, I would hear things like that outside, and it was always very peculiar, because the sound of a coyote, but I would hear a lot of background sounds which sounded like other animals that didn't make any sense. But this might just be it. Clicking, clacking. Do they ever sound like almost robotic? Did you ever see the movie Contact, where you have these 2 beings that look like big octopus, and they're in a ship, and they're communicating? Abbott Costello, do you remember them? The way they spoke was almost robotic in a way when they were speaking, and they would speak very quickly. I don't know.
There is a sound that they make, and you only hear it when they're particularly close. And I found it very interesting when I was watching. I don't know if you guys or your listeners watch Twin Paranormal, the YouTube channel. It's got this group of young guys in Nevada that are ghost hunters, basically. But they're really lovely guys. They introduce themselves to the spirits and tell the spirits what kind of devices they're going to be using, and they're very engaging and humble kinds of guys, and they get a lot of results because of that approach.
I agree.
But they went out into the desert at one stage to some ruins, and were hearing coyotes barking, what they thought were coyotes. I'm pretty sure they weren't. Heard loud booming sounds out in the desert, which is like probably one of their portals. Like there's a click when just an individual, if you hear in your house a click, and sometimes also if it's followed with a smell of like decaying flesh or sulfur or something like that, but you hear this click sound, it's something small that's passed through a portal. When they jump around, they can jump all around the earth from different places. They use technology to open natural wormholes. When a larger object's passing through, it can make a boom sound.
Or a big popping.
Yeah, big popping. I think it depends on how large the thing is.
Yeah.
So this group of guys, one of their episodes, were out in the desert. They were hearing these boom, boom sounds, and they were using these voice boxes. And the voice box says, it said portal. It actually said that. And then they were having very coherent conversations using these kinds of electronic voice phenomena.
They work very well.
Yeah, and it seems that the Mudgeon or the tall whites as well can use their technologies and have them somehow interface with our own in a very good way. But they heard. Sorry, I'm going. That took me.
No. This is. I want you to lead it. We'll follow. We'll follow along.
A hissing and clicking sound, which is the sound of which is one of their camouflage codes, languages they use. So they seem to have different linguistic systems that are complete and total languages within themselves, where they can just speak in whistles, they can just speak in barks. They have their original natural language that sounds more like, say, Japanese to my ears anyway. But they also have a hissing and clicking one for when they're trying to be very quiet. And you only hear that when they're very, very close to you physically. And these young guys heard the sound and then flashed a light up and saw a dark shape on the top of one of the buildings, flashed the light up when it was gone. And the way, so that particular sound sort of reminds me a bit of possums in Australia. I'm not quite sure what opossums sound like in North America, but possums in Australia can get this real sort of rasping sound and clicking.
Yeah. Yes.
Like that.
Yeah.
Know that
I've got them behind me. I live in the country, so they're everywhere. Yeah.
These guys in their camouflage language have a particular language that just utilizes those sounds as well. So they sort of move all over the place. And depending, like in register in the language that they're choosing to use at the time, for subterfuge, and they're fluent in these things, and they don't, if they speak in a more normal sounding human voice, talking to each other, whispering to each other, or things like that, like we would. There's a siren. Don't know if you heard that. They'll give themselves away more easily, But if you hear bird sounds, animal sounds, and things like that, you might accidentally overhear them, but you're much less likely to think anything odd of it.
Let's talk about their temperament then, because a lot of the characteristics that you're describing with the tall whites, is this typical of other types of, like, the gray? The tall whites do resemble in a way the grays, and the temperaments.
I think they're called tall grays. I think tall whites and tall grays are the same thing. But
I think they're the same.
Tall grays. Yeah. I'm pretty sure that they're the same thing. Very, very sure. Because Charles Hall says that he met tall grays, or he saw them from a distance in one of his books, where he thought he was interacting with a different kind of being. He said they were tall grays.
Right.
I've read that book. They're tall whites in what I call boa suits. Tall whites in their military grade suits that are dark grey to black, that can cloak. At night, have glowing red eyes, have a long nose-like appendage on the front of their face to amplify and resonate sound. So that's and then they can make these really deep hooting and whooping sounds as well to communicate over long distances. That thing sort of passes up over the top of their skull a bit. I've got on my YouTube channel, I've got some videos there where I've done sketches of these things, and also a breathing device. Even though they breathe our air quite well, they have a lot of allergies, and this is to keep out dust and pollen. But it's not really because they're from another planet or something like that. Even though they are spacefaring and have spent time elsewhere, but they're indigenous to here. But so the tall greys are tall whites, and short greys are something else again. But their temperament is as wide as ours. A whole gamut of compassionate, spiritually, what we might call more spiritually advanced beings. They have priests and priestesses. They have a religious system, a kind of spirituality that is sort of bit strange to us. But
Right.
And a lot of that is going to go in my second book as well, sort of talking about the way their worldview and how it integrates with their technologies as well.
Mhm.
Viewing the future, they rely a lot on future-looking prophetic technologies to actualize a particular timeline out of potentiality. They're always thinking into the future. They're always acting now and piloting it like you'd pilot a TV show or pilot a research project, testing it to see how it will look 10, 20, 50, 100, 1,000 years from now, what consequences will come from actions now, and then behaving appropriately.
Mhm.
But they can be deadly. And I'm sure a lot of the missing 411 cases, especially in regards to hunters, is them killing people that are too
Really?
close to
Killing,
the ground.
not abducting.
They do abduct people as well. Yeah. Well, they've abducted me. Abduction.
Yes.
I mean, I'm happy about it. So I don't know if you'd say it was abduction, but
But to kill somebody, that's pretty.
That's
What could motivate them to want to do that as opposed to
life and death? If they think that their children are being threatened, they can respond with lethal force. If they consider that you have aggressive and malicious intent with a deadly weapon.
Well,
So
yeah, if you're out with hunters, you're being faced with rifles. That's a testy situation. Yeah,
that's right. If they're reading your mind when you're approaching one of their habitations, if they just happen to be present in that habitation, underground habitation, they move around and chase the warmth. So if it's if it's summer for you, say, they're more likely to be there underneath mountains in your national parks. And they were under the oceans and things like that as well, but they sort of move around. So if it's cold, they're less likely to be there. The habitations will be dormant. But if you're a hunter and you're near where their habitations are and they happen to be on the surface and they read your mind and you have aggressive and malicious intent, and a hunter, of course, does towards animals, they are thinking, I am going to kill something, take its life. They read these thoughts and sometimes
they'll react.
They'll react. They'll overreact. If a hunter, if they've failed, if the Mudgeon or tall whites, whatever you want to call them, Orions, if they've failed to detect a hunter who's, say, like burst in on them in an opening, like in an open space in a forest, there's a clearing where there's a few adults with children playing, and the hunter's armed, frightened, and goes to shoot one of them, they're dead. And so they also have a policy of death for death as well. So if a hunter accidentally, especially if a hunter accidentally shoots one of them,
eye for an eye.
Now, and they have a military system, like they have an advanced military, highly what's the word I'm looking for? Echelons, like highly different roles. I can't think of the word at the moment, but anyway,
hierarchy, sort of
hierarchy. Perfect. Yes. Thank you, Michelle.
Yeah, that's
hierarchical, very hierarchical military system.
Right.
And very, very good at what they do. Advanced technologies, and a lot of their soldiers, particularly leaders in their military, can be quite cruel and callous individuals. In my opinion, this is the same as our military.
I was just going to say that. You took the words right out of my mouth. But also a belief in angels, the different choirs, the hierarchy of angels as well.
Yeah. That's true.
And demonics. God, it just mirrors everything.
That's what I was going to say. I think if you're a religious person, you would fall under angels or demons. And if you're into ufology, you're going to go with a different type of interdimensional being or interplanetary I find that fascinating because the characteristics are so similar. Before we continue, I just want to address some of the comments or questions, and then we can move forward to the next leg of my question. So for those who are listening and not watching, I'll ask if Amelia can go ahead and pop off. Here we go.
Yeah, no problem. Dave Petrella says, I believe a lot of the first cultures were directly descended from the sky people, and they in fact taught us their languages. I think they were languages first. They were their languages rather first before we used them.
That's very possible. And Wes, hello, Wes.
Hi, Wes. Some African cultures communicate through clicking.
That's
I've seen the tribal,
Yes.
That's right. They're very interesting. And also whistling. There's old traditional whistling languages in Greece and other parts of Europe, I think,
That's
that they used to
interesting.
communicate over long distances. They have a language in their culture I think they're dying out a lot now because younger generations aren't interested.
No.
Which is
They'd
sad.
use them to
A
communicate.
lot of the dialects are dying out everywhere all over the world,
Yeah, it's
though.
very sad.
With technology, they're anglicizing all of their words too. There's a lot of English in their languages, especially Italy. Tamara Engel, hi Tamara, says, do they have an accent when they speak your language?
If they mimic, that's
If they're
actually
mimicking,
very
that's
sad.
a really good observation.
When they speak English to me, they usually have an Australian accent, but sometimes American. Or what I'd say was more
why
like standard American.
That's
Not
bizarre.
Canadian?
Yeah.
What's the difference?
There's a big, so you don't notice the difference,
I don't
but the
know.
Americans think we have an accent,
It's
and I
true.
don't understand where it comes from because we sound like the people on TV.
I know, it's funny.
Yeah. No, I think I can usually pick a Canadian voice as opposed to other
Really?
like US dialect.
How would you describe that, or dare I ask?
I wouldn't like to offend you. No.
Okay, great.
Maybe speaking a little bit further forward, like you're pronouncing, like you're moving the vowels further towards your teeth.
Yes,
Whereas
we
sort of more
enunciate
standard American
everything.
accent, speak further in the back.
Yes.
Maybe.
Right.
I'm not sure.
We enunciate everything. And I always say the English, the British never enunciate anything. They have this lazy tongue. And I love their accent. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying that's how it comes about, right?
Yeah.
Okay, Amelia, do you want to get this one?
Yes, sorry.
This is in reference, I think, to the gentleman that you were talking about in the book.
Yes.
This is where this came up.
He claimed he was. Oh yes, yeah. He claimed that's right. Charles Hall claimed that one particular,
that's a long one.
Yeah.
one particular individual, one particular tall white a female that he was interacting with, he stepped forward and she was flighty and overreacted, and the device she was holding in their hands, because they have what look like wands, but they can be lethal. They can just stun you, or if they're set too high, they can kill you. And she tried to kill him, or didn't realize it wasn't on stun. I'm not quite sure.
Right.
But what happened was that all of his blood vessels in his throat started to leak out into his throat. And they said to him, "You're going to die now. We're sorry for this. It was an accident, blah, blah, blah." But he just lay down on the ground in the sand and pushed his hands into his throat and held them there, and was just lying there like that for hours. And the bleeding seemed to have stopped, or he could breathe again. But then when he tried to take his hands away, it started again. Yeah. So he did it again, and he lay there all night, I think. And by the morning, he'd actually stopped it, and they were really surprised he survived. This is in one of his books. And because this was happening, the United States Air Force, the generals, were too frightened to go and save him, because they're frightened of the tall whites, especially in situations like this where there's everyone's prone to overreaction. And the Mudgeonah, the tall whites, he never calls them Mudgeonah. That's what they said they're called to me, but Charles Hall calls them tall whites. Same beings, though, identical in every way. Even though he didn't suggest they were future humans, which is what they've said to me, they are blah, 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 but definitely the same beings, same appearance, same languages. So they left him there until he felt like he could drive back himself, and he had to drive himself back the next day. But yeah, I think that's probably what the gentleman's referring to when he says, is that the guy that got injured by tall whites and survived? Yeah,
I think so. Sarah, just write down your question and we'll get to it. One from Wes. Okay, go ahead.
Wes, are the smaller ones more feisty? What are you insinuating, Wes?
The
younger.
I'm not that little. A little bit bigger.
And feisty. Sorry,
yes.
Ryan.
No, sorry. The
feisty,
younger,
yes.
If he means like the smaller races,
as far
as I know,
race?
I know of 4 different kinds of races, but of 4 different kinds of beings. Future lineage humans that aren't really aliens because they're not really extraterrestrials. They're from a future timeline. But anyway, if he means just what are the younger tall whites, they're much more inclined to be flighty and over physical and jump around and jump off things. And they move incredibly fast, much faster
like puppies.
than we move. Like puppies, yeah. But the adults as well are fairly fast and jerky moving. When they're in your presence and they're moving around, they're doing a bit of rapping, like they move with twitchy speed. And if they move,
they got a little Drake in them, a little Canadian.
But the young ones can be, and the young ones' emotional range is much faster as well. So they're having, like, how it's normally part of UFO lore. I'll say in Australian English, we'd say law, and it sounds exactly the way we'd pronounce LAW, but I'm saying LORE.
Yes.
Lore. They normally say, people say, oh, ETs don't seem to have emotions. And maybe they're interested in us because we have a high emotional range, and they're interested in maybe, taking some of that into their own DNA and things like this. Well, that might be true about some races, but not the Mudgeonah, the tall whites. They have incredibly erratic, what seems to us erratic, fast-moving, emotional lives. So if you're connecting to them and they're wearing their stuff, their telepath tech, they'll be angry, sad, happy, disappointed, forgiving, and all this kind of stuff, flying around with all these different thoughts flying through your head, which can be sort of overwhelming. And they have depths of emotion that are well above and below ours. And they even have a debate going as to whether Homo sapiens, as to whether we can truly feel love. Because what they experience when they're looking into our minds is nowhere near the depth of emotion they feel when they feel love.
Wow.
But this kind of thing can be dangerous, which is part of the reason, or dangerous in the sense that you can see perhaps how they can be lethal, these things. The tall whites, overreaction, responding to problems, and then forgiving and being over it.
It's
but
like
by the time
act now, think about it later sort of thing, right?
Yeah, and they can't multitask as well, where they have minds. And my mind sort of works like this anyway, so I sort of sympathize with them. But they can only really focus on one thing at a time, and they become engrossed in something, and it's easy to startle them.
So they're all males.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, isn't it?
You said focus on one thing. Females are known for multitasking. That's why I'm saying.
I agree.
I'm the lighter one here, just saying, like, meaning the stupid one-liners. But seriously, like, I'm really intrigued by this because everything you're telling us tonight, I've never heard before. So I'm hearing it all for the first time. I'm learning. I'm overwhelmed. I have a deep question before I forget, if you don't mind, if I can ask you, how do they survive to 800 years? What do they live on? What is their, like, we're not saying there's tall whites that are Martha Stewart here. Like, what do they consume? What fuels them?
They're vegan, actually, you'd describe them as. They only eat animal products. They refuse even to wear garments, clothing that is made from animals.
Yeah.
They only wear artificial, like synthetic garments or plant-based garments. They only eat plants, and they eat grains and vegetables and fruit and things like this. They make little cakes. They collect seeds as well, just from nature as well, to make flour. And they've tampered with their own genetics. They have such long lifespans because of genetic engineering and trying to lengthen their lifespans, like we're trying to do at the moment, like Homo sapiens is engaged in doing at the moment. What that has meant, though, is that in theory, yes, they can live to 700 or 800 years, but they rarely do. And quite often they succumb to disease and sicknesses that we don't even have. They have genetic issues. Part of the reason why they interbreed with us, the only reason why they interbreed with us.
So hybridization, basically.
Hybridization, right. Yeah. Right. It depends on how closely related they are to us as to whether you'd say they're hybrids or just mixed race. I'm not, because they are so closely related to us that they still can't actually interbreed in the old-fashioned way, which you see in cases like the case of Antonio Villas-Boas in Brazil in 1957, where there was copulation in the old-fashioned way. And also Peter Curie in Sydney in the 1990s, with the tall, fair woman with huge blue eyes, fine white hair. He, in a different encounter, heard them chirping to each other. So this is typical tall white stuff. They consider the sexual act as sacred. They try not to take that out of the mix if possible as well. So they can live for long periods, but they take some of our DNA, older source DNA, the DNA of their ancestors, because we are archaic hominins to them.
Yeah.
From roughly 50 to 60,000 years in our future.
We're their Neanderthals.
It will never occur. Pardon?
Yeah. We're their Neanderthals. Like we're...
Yeah.
Yeah.
And very healthy from their perspective anyway.
So,
because we haven't begun tampering with our own genetics. So they try to...
It's coming.
I was just going to say it'd be interesting to see if they ate corn, because we all have a theory about corn, right? So...
my curiosity is that there are a lot of eyewitness reports, like you're saying, they're pretty much terrestrial beings, like they're here on planet Earth. But there's a lot of sightings that happen where these tall whites, unless there's a different branch of them, are on crafts.
Oh yeah, they're interstellar. They have they're spacefaring.
Okay.
They spent tens of thousands of years living on an Earth-like planet orbiting Al-Nalam, the middle star of Orion's belt. And they returned to their ancient home, the Earth, in an older form.
Right.
Because they couldn't fix their genetic issues.
Right.
So, which have developed mostly because of genetic engineering. So, people may think they're very clever tampering with genetics, but to elongate lives and things like that. But they found that there's lots of symptoms and side effects that open up that are unforeseen. And some of them are like prone to certain diseases, allergies, their immune systems breaking down, their organs not windows of growth they didn't foresee happening. So they grow, a few hundred years will go by and they'll start growing again. And then they'll grow at an incredible speed and then stop. And then they'll be like that again for a couple of hundred years, and they'll grow again. Right. These growth spurts mean that their organs can't keep up.
Yes.
And they they can become thin. Their organs become stretched thin and can start leaching out into themselves. They get very sick. They end up dying from that. But that's normally at advanced age if they've been lucky enough to survive that long in the first place. Totally reliant on technologies. If they didn't have their technologies to support them, they wouldn't last a week on the Earth.
Do they look like us on the inside?
I think so. I'm not quite sure what kind of changes have happened or what they've done to themselves.
Well, because you said organs, that's what made me think of that. Because here, if you go this way too much, you can put a lot of strain on your organs. So I understand when you're growing this way, it's the same thing. Yeah. They have like a kind of a Benjamin Button kind of lifestyle. That is so surreal. Okay,
you
that's right. Well, they'll put strain on your heart, of course, doesn't it? If your heart is not growing to support
that mass,
a frame that is now 10 foot tall,
that is huge.
So,
thin or not?
There's stories of these tall whites, Orions, actually assisting humans, like curing cancer and doing things of that nature, but they can't seem to help themselves very well.
No, that's why that's right. That seems like it's the incongruity there, or discrepancy there. But what it is that they seem very capable at healing us or animal life on this planet with their own advanced technologies, not very capable of healing themselves. If they are damaged, they take a long time to heal. They can die from infections. So if they're bitten by a dog, say, they're very likely to die.
So they're not really immune from anything that we would be immune from. It was as far as danger goes. A dog bite, wild animal bite, a
virus.
Hunter, they're very.
Well, I'm not quite sure which of our viruses can and can't affect them. I know that they're immune to HIV and some other sexually transmitted diseases.
It's kind of like the Rh negative blood type, which are allegedly also immune to HIV.
Okay, that's interesting.
Right?
The hair sample from the woman.
Yeah, that's been around for over 20 years. That theory, yeah.
The hair sample from the female that Peter Curie met, she left a head hair, white hair. It was immune to HIV and a couple of other viruses. Had a lot of Gaelic and Basque DNA, Homo sapiens Gaelic and Basque DNA, probably gleaned from Irish and Scottish and Basque populations in older times, because these guys are the fairies, right? In the sense that they're the elves, what would you call the Nahuishlan, the gentry, the tall, fair elves of Irish Gaelic lore,
right?
That were chirping, subterranean dwelling, whistling beings that could become invisible and act as poltergeist and influence your mind and put on glamours or enchantments to make themselves appear like things that they're not, which is exactly what the tall whites do. The description of the Gaelic Uishlan or Sheechan, elves or fairies, is pretty much identical to the description given by Charles Hall for the tall whites in his books. Yeah, anyway.
Okay, we'll get on to a question. Bubbly?
Hi, Sherry Berry.
Hey, Sherry.
Why would a tall white attach to or be a guardian to a gifted human for an entire lifetime? Asking for a friend.
Well, I mean, I don't know if you're talking about me. I don't know if I'm very gifted. That's a very nice
you
thing
do
to say if you're actually referring to me. But if you just meet people in general,
yeah.
I'm not quite
definitely
sure.
You.
Yeah. I'm not very sure. I'm not sure exactly what their motivations are for that kind of thing. I think they have different reasons for attaching themselves to people that may not seem obvious at the time, because as I was saying before, they use prophetic technologies. They're always future looking. And someone they may choose now that seems like an odd choice. Why would they be interested in Johnny down the road? You know, he doesn't seem to have anything that special about him, but they seem to be very interested in Johnny. What's going on?
Maybe something future that they know is coming.
They know.
Yeah,
they're aware of
the repercussions of this involvement at that stage of that person's life may reflect on something about the way he raises his children, or who knows. And cause, infinite fluctuations in the world soup of potentiality, to like when people talk about the butterfly effect and things like that with systems theory.
Total sense, because a lot of people will have experiences and they remember them from childhood. So that makes sense. I just don't understand why they're here for us. Mike Walker, hi, Mike.
Hey, Mike.
That's why I think they are us in the future that came back to retrieve and use what is in our classic DNA to help bring them back to par.
Yeah,
that's a theory that is shared by many.
Yeah. That's I agree. That's their primary motivation for this. Yeah.
Yeah. Here's a different twist to this. Too,
Amidas, am I pronouncing that correctly? You may have answered this, but why would they bother with us in a backward species? That's what I just, we think alike.
Yeah, they're interested in our genetics. We're just so hot right now that
we're so hot.
Right.
Wow. Are we living in the same planet?
We're the going fad right now. Yeah.
This is their ancient planet, and this is where earlier forms of them.
Okay.
And they are, and now they are here permanently.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, and this is where they belong, and now they're sort of influencing and trying to make sure the planet's healthy for their sake as well, and influencing our geopolitical climate and
future-wise too for themselves, right?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
That I laughed at first, but this is a really good question. Since they have pale skin,
they're delicate. These guys.
Do they have to apply sunblock while outside? Being in a Nevada desert during the summertime would be brutal, and I concur, because it's like 125, 130 degrees. So
yeah, I suppose they must have something like that protecting them. Otherwise, you'd think so. Yeah.
Yeah, they seem to be
they're subterranean dwelling.
That's true too. So you really might not see them come.
And they usually come out at night. Much more likely to see them at night than during the day, above like on the surface. So,
Is that how it was for you? Do you always see them at night?
Not always. I have seen, when I was a kid, I saw them a couple of times during the day, and running in one of our state parks nearby, I've seen one in a suit, in one of their boa suits during the day. But yeah, nighttime mostly, yeah.
So do you think that they're affected, or they would be affected by like our LED lights now and things of that nature, all the electricity and the power and the 5G, things like that? Would that mess them up with their own, I say, radars, tuning into people?
I don't think so. Otherwise, by now they would have put a stop to it, I think. Because basically, they run the show, or they stay out of our affairs for the most part, but sometimes they feel the need to steer the course of our history. They've been here for thousands of years. And when we misbehave, like for instance, at the moment, our technological advancement is getting well beyond, I think, our cultural maturity. Let's just say, where, you can see things that are happening in our world, political things, wars, etc., so on. People are basically behaving like kids in the primary school sandpit. It's really not elevated beyond that.
Yeah.
With all of these deadly sophisticated toys, now the tall whites here permanently in subterranean habitations can't have us messing up the biodiversity and the ecosystems of this planet permanently. In the sense that if we go too far, they'll have to take out. Well, there's a couple of options. They will either intervene and take our technologies away for us and throw us back to being pre-industrial, or even earlier.
Wow.
Which will mean the collapse in our population levels, because we won't be able to. Like if you go back too far, of course, you don't have the advanced technologies. You can't grow the food to support populations.
Right.
So it'll be sort of like a soft Armageddon. But they still require some populations of us, because we're like free-range, archaic humans to them. They still require natural breeding Homo sapiens to be on this planet in certain numbers. But if we're damaging the planet too much, there's no point to us, really, not in large numbers. But if, the other option is for us to mature culturally enough so that we can adopt their technologies, overseen by them, though. They'd still be stewards of some kind. They could gift us their technologies, versions of them that maybe we couldn't tamper and open up, because as Homo sapiens, we always want to weaponize things, So they couldn't have us, but their technologies, if you were to weaponize them, you'd be able to destroy the planet a million times over.
All of them.
Yeah,
I have a question for you. You're talking about the tall whites, and you had said that they are in control. What about the other species? A lot of people believe that they are in control of this planet, and that is it possible that they're all doing it, or are they like multi-governments because they're different races?
This is what I think I mentioned this last time I was with you guys. This is where I get myself into trouble. With lots no, this is all right. With lots of other people that are in ufology and experiences. I don't have many friends, by the way, but this is the way it is.
We're your friends.
We're friends, yeah.
We're your friends. I'm learning. I'm not familiar. This is all. Everybody who comes on here, I'm learning. I'm not in that ufology field or crowd. So for me, this is an amazing experience.
Very new to this.
Yes, and I thank you.
No worries. Cheers. I wasn't fishing for a compliment there.
I know.
But
Don't worry, I'm psychic. I knew that.
So what were we talking about? Sorry, going off track here.
I do that to people.
Yeah.
What about other species? What are your thoughts on that?
Sorry.
Yeah.
This is where I get myself into trouble. Yeah, rewind.
Yeah.
No, just in that I'm fairly certain there are only 2 species left. There were 4. So I'm fairly certain there's no such thing, say, as reptilian aliens, and there never has been, other than misidentified tall whites in boa suits, growling with claws. They have prosthetic claws. glowing red eyes, sometimes glowing red but black as well. With their weird helmets, look like they sort of had fins on them and stuff like that. A lot of the different ET races in sort of like the folklore, we could say, of modern ufology are derived, in my opinion, from only 4 races that are all future humans. And genuine aliens, as far as I'm aware, that have an evolutionary history beyond Earth, don't visit Earth. They have no interest in Earth. The only reason the 4 races have come and visited us is because they need our DNA, because they are us. Now, having said that, so that's where, you know, I clash with a lot of people, because of course me saying that's not going to be a popular sentiment, of course, especially
because you're saying you're saying everyone has been abducted at one point or another. You're literally
that's
saying
true as
that.
well.
Yeah. Why?
That's true as well. Lots and lots of people across the face of the earth know these people but don't remember it.
No.
And they influence. You might have a lot of dreams. You might create art. You might make paintings of them and things like this. They might influence your songwriting. Sometimes deliberately they influence artists. Sometimes it's just accidental, incidental, because you're an experiencer and you live near one of their underground habitations, or they've been interested in you for different reasons over your life. Sometimes maybe you're part of their breeding program, but not remember. And this is a bit of a dodgy element to the way they work as well, where it's supposed to be consensual, but then they'll remove your memory of it. So if they approach you and say, hey, can you help us with our species? It's a noble cause. We're dying out here unless we have a hit every couple of generations from your healthy genomes. We're going to die out as a race. Could you help us out, please? And you say yes, you acquiesce. This is cool. I'll help you out. They're not going to let you remember any of that, probably. So then you'll feel that your house is haunted. You'll have poltergeist activity, dark people standing over your bed at night, hands on you in the middle of the night, voices in your house, music, heavy boots on the stair or on the roof.
Frequencies.
You are a imaginer experiencer. Most, this, in my opinion, I'm pretty sure that it's the case that most hauntings are these guys and not disembodied, discarnate, deceased humans.
Most, not all, because mediums are constantly validated by communicating with spirits on the other side. So I'm just curious about that. Now, could they possibly, because they're taking from us through our lifetimes for our future selves, could they be the reason why we have illnesses? Don't kill me if you're listening right now and watching over me going, I'm going to beat her tonight when she's sleeping. But I'm just curious because
rough her up, straighten her out.
I'm just like, I'm scared to speak now. I'm going to have nightmares. I'm telling you, Ryan, it's a good thing you're a few hours ahead because I might call you. But seriously.
I think...
because they have the power to heal, but do they have the power? Like, can they come in and say, I'm going to see what it's like for you to have cancer, or I'm going to see what it's like for you to go without?
I don't think so.
I hope not.
Well, I hope not as well, because I'd be very embarrassed to be associated with them if they're doing stuff like that. I'm pretty sure that they don't do things like that. They do heal people, some people sometimes. Good. They do help people, save people. And like I was saying before, which is, I was being an alarmist talking about how people in the forest can be bumped off by them if they're hunters or whatever. They also help. They also help.
That could happen to anybody, even a human. You could get bumped off if you're taken away. Yeah.
But they also help lost people, especially children, and send ideas about where search parties are to steer you towards them, or call out in the forest to move you towards where you'll be safe, towards a river, so you can follow it. And this kind of thing, especially children. Take children in, feed them, keep them warm, and then wait for a while until emergency groups are nearby, and then release them with a wiped memory. This is stuff that they do. And the fairies have always done this kind of stuff.
Who's sending them back with their clothes backwards and inside out like 5 years later, but they're still the same age? No,
Well,
I've
you're
heard these
talking about,
stories. That's why
yeah,
I'm
but you're
asking.
talking about, I think, portals.
Portals.
Like
Oh,
for
okay.
example, Hoyabatu Forest in Romania, we're just said to have a portal. It's the haunted forest. A little girl disappeared at 5 years of age. 5 years later, showed up. Still 5 years of age. Just not too,
wow, yeah.
not the same. And yeah, and the clothes is all weird and abductions. A lot of
Yeah,
people
wow.
say when they're abducted and brought back that sometimes their clothes are on backwards and things of that
they blame
nature.
it on the grays, though.
Right.
Maybe a little
Unfamiliar with
The little
how our
ones.
clothes are going back on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think the tall whites do a lot of abductions as well.
Mhm.
And they're seeing people, like I was saying, like lots of people. I mean, it's sort of people familiar with Doctor Who. We're turning to science fiction here to make a point, but the episodes about the silence, about the tall, weird white beings in business suits. That when you see them, you're freaked out, you turn away, and you forget that you saw them instantly. The tall whites have technologies that allow for that kind of thing.
Kind of like the American Men in Black. Yeah.
Yeah, you could have an experience. You could go out take rubbish out to the bins, see some weird guy that's having a conversation with you, come back in and your wife say to you, your husband say to you, why were you so long? And you're like, I don't really remember. I think I fell over or something. I'm not quite sure. Or have some kind of screen memory where they use some glamour on you, maybe, where you come in and you go, I just had the most involved, intricate conversation with an owl sitting on my...
an owl. Yes, it's true.
And really, you had a conversation with one of them, and they've tampered with your memory alteration, they call it.
Yeah,
that's what they apologized to me once about this, what they called it in English was memory alteration. So they're not calling it memory wipe, they're saying alteration. And I think that's because they're not really taking anything away. It's almost like they're going into your memory files and like changing the labels, so you can't
but that
find
messes you up. Like I would think people with Alzheimer's and dementia, like after a while, you can only do that so many times before you start messing things up.
So I wonder, is that
probably
is Alzheimer's and dementia? I mean, they can't get a grasp on it, and how to cope with it. Is that just a side effect of being probed for years? I don't know.
Yeah, so
right. I'm not sure about that. Yeah,
I don't know, because they say it's genetic, but yet you'll see it skip generation, and then happen again.
Mm-hmm.
Like my grandmother had it from heart disease, and my father had dementia because of having the tiny little strokes. Okay. And I often wonder about that. When you're saying it to me, that's going through my head. Is right. How does somebody so healthy all of a sudden just
Yeah,
and they refer to it as pinpricks, which is interesting. It can't
be good for you. I'm just like, I think as adults, we suffer from memory loss. Sometimes it's just like, what? Like, I get we age, but this happens to people sometimes at a fairly younger age, like in their 30s. They're like, God, why can't I remember anything? It shouldn't be. Yeah. Like it's just a curiosity if you think that this constant looping or scrubbing could contribute to that sort of thing.
Yeah, well, hopefully that's not part of the reason for that kind of thing. But yeah,
a side effect.
If they're constantly doing a side effect, yes. Some people more than others are having this happen to them, and some people I think are completely unaware.
Mm-hmm.
Then you get other people that think their houses are haunted, and then you get other people that remembering a little bit more of that and starting to think, especially in our day with UFO lore being such a big part of pop culture, sort of recognizing stuff a little bit more like that maybe. Especially if poltergeist activity and shadow people activity happens in tandem with seeing a UFO, which often they do. They go in concert quite often. You'll see a UFO and then all of a sudden your house is haunted. But
so chances are that's what it is. Shadow people and that would make sense.
These suits, the highly advanced technology, from what I can tell, they can levitate, become intangible, which is to say, like shift their atomic structure somehow so they can pass through solid objects, walk through walls, and they can become invisible. And it seems to be sometimes their invisibility is 100% effective, where you cannot see them at all.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes they look like a shimmer like in the Predator movie.
Seen those. Yes, I have.
And you
yeah.
see something out of the corner of your eye, there'll be a shimmer,
Yeah.
or sometimes you'll see a shimmer go through a wall, and then you look in the next room and it actually comes through into the next room.
Or like a glitch in the Matrix, all pixelated.
Yeah. I think their suits sometimes seem to be more
like
effective
spins
than other times.
Right.
I'm not quite sure why sometimes they, and maybe that's even purposeful. Who knows? Sometimes their motives are sort of so beyond what we can understand. Maybe sometimes they want you to see them a little bit. To
Well,
let
what
you know
about people
something's-
who claim that they're being pulled through walls and they can feel themselves
Oh yeah,
somehow just-
I've had that happen. Walls and the ceiling and through glass through a window.
So how?
So one abduction I had, I stood up on my bed and then lifted off, and then was taken through a large window through the glass, and it felt weird as it went through me, and then I was outside. And then another time they returned me upside down through the roof, and I came through, and it's physical, not like a out of body experience or something like that. Just real awake with two of them already in the kitchen waiting for me, looking up as I came through, and then spun me back around, and then levitated me back towards bed. They can make you as well pass through solid objects. Another time, I think I went through the roof of my porch. I'm not quite sure if I went around the roof or went through it, and went up into a craft, and they were doing things. They did something really painful to the back of my skull. All the time, with a tall white woman with huge blue eyes sitting on the bed next to me. And the next day, our television aerial antenna was all twisted around, right there where I'd gone up over the roof. But in that instance, I think I went through the roof maybe as well. Yeah. And I read in later cases, I read later on in other cases that having the TV antenna on your roof twist around sometimes happens, like the anti-gravitics in their craft can twist up metallic objects on roofs.
Are there crafts anything like we have vehicles like Maseratis, Ferraris, and things? I know this sounds petty, but I'm just stupid things that go through my head. They have different design crafts, and you know what I mean, like the way we do here.
They have their old school craft that they seem to be unable to reproduce here, but they still have a small fleet of these highly advanced, grown in zero-G, organic biotechnology, where with a computer that has an organic brain. It interfaces with the pilots. The craft that they make here now in this timeline, they seem to not have the appropriate infrastructure in place to be able to, or maybe not access to materials that they had in Orion, but they can't reproduce these craft here, so they use our infrastructure. And I'm fairly certain that's one of the agreements and treaties they have with the United States government, the United States Air Force,
or Elon Musk. Yeah.
Well, maybe or parts. So this sort of makes nonsense of the dichotomy people normally talk about with ours versus theirs.
Right.
You know, where you see some craft, this sleek craft that's seamless, that feels like it has sentience and awareness, looks like a space whale, elegantly flying through the sky. Well, that will be something like their older technology that they've brought here.
Yeah.
But then when you see craft that have rivets and seams that look like they've been made in segments out of our materials, they can be their craft too. In fact, most of their craft are like that. So most of their craft. So there's a kind of craft they have that Charles Hall talked about. Also at Skinwalker Ranch, they talked about them. They're often called RVs, flying recreational vehicles. They look like flying white buses.
See? So I'm not far off.
I think the Tic Tac craft, the Tic Tac phenomenon, I think is probably these craft as well being seen.
The Tic Tac, I call it a capsule.
There's been at least three occasions I've been on board this kind of craft. And one of the situations was taken to like a meeting with other people, other Homo sapiens people, where I was having an argument with another guy at the table, and then it was time to go home, and we all got on board a craft and left. And then another time I went on board with another couple of Homo sapiens people, and there were two elderly tall whites, very tall ones, sitting in the back, and a younger girl giving a speech to us, telling us about stuff, and I can't remember, unfortunately, the content of it. But the those craft that I've been in have seats that look like they're out of our buses for passengers. Have the seats for the pilots just look like they're out of our fighter planes.
You're kidding.
And they have, and it's like they've been made from our own segments, fabrications from our own factories and industries.
Right.
And a lot of their craft are like that. So if
but
you
in vinyl, never leather. Yeah.
I haven't seen leather, but not. Or they wouldn't be leather. That's right, because
that's right.
No, they're vegan. Yeah.
But like a fabric, a cottony kind of.
So essentially, the government could probably reverse engineer a better craft than they actually can.
So maybe they are doing it, and we just
they're using their superior science to utilize our technologies to superior effect.
Right.
So they're using stuff that's available to us, but the ways that they're using it mean that they're super luminal spacefaring craft that are made out of our stuff. That we can't, or maybe we can. Maybe some of our back engineered craft are capable of that kind of stuff. I don't know, but that we don't know about. But certainly, if you see a craft that has segments and seems to have rivets and girders and things like that, the general consensus in the UFO world is, they must be ours. But the thing is most of the tall white craft look like that anyway.
Yeah.
And you will hear stories like that from people who have been abducted or contactees that they see owls in their windows. I mean, that's a common thing.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, screen memory most likely.
It must be. Maybe it's like a fuzzy recollection, and that's why they interpret it that way, or I don't know. But oh my God,
so essentially they're not something to be feared like most people would think. Tell us a little bit about the small grays, because those seem to be culprits as well. And it's funny because, in a lot of cases that I've done, you filled in a lot of blanks. It's already stuff. Some of it, I understood the basics of it, but you filled in a lot of blanks because I think those of us in the paranormal field always end up in ufology, because I've always seen at least 50-50 where people have been aware, at least, that they've had extraterrestrial happenings, I guess, where they think it's been a demonic thing. I mean, I went through an attachment, which now I know I've had ET experiences as a child. So now I'm going, you know what? And I know it stayed with me. And talking to my kids, for example, and even my parents or my mother, my father has Alzheimer's, probably scrubbed too many times. But I know now it could have been extraterrestrial, because we would see crafts and stuff all the time.
Right.
So, but little grays are the ones that people are reporting seeing. And even with a lot of the families I've worked with throughout the last couple of decades, it's always been the small ones. I haven't heard too many people talk about the tall ones.
Okay. Yeah, well, I think gray, I think any of the four races have been called grays at different times. I think one of them is where you can still see the whites of their eyes.
Yes.
And their eyes are larger than ours, but not massively large. And they usually have brown eyes, but sometimes blue, I think, sometimes green. You can still see the whites of their eyes. So they don't have the black eyes. Really big heads, sort of small faces. They look a little bit like Megamind, like the character.
Yes.
From the cartoon.
Yes.
Yeah.
So there's that kind. And then sometimes they're called grays, and their skin kind of looks like the belly of a snake, or like a belly of a lizard. So they have a of scales with a kind of a sheen, and they have 3 really big fingers with slight claws, and a big thumb, and their hands look like they're much too large for their body, and they get to about 5 foot tall, and they sort of have a little bit of a musculature to their appearance. They're not that sort of painfully thin look. They sort of have a little bit more of a thickness to their body. And then you have another race that is darker. So they're sort of like a pale gray. Then you have another race that is smaller, dark grey, big black eyes, much more pronounced scales, claws that are much longer, four fingers with no thumb. But I'm pretty sure that what looks like one of the fingers is actually a migrated thumb. So it's 3 fingers and a thumb, but one of the fingers looks like a thumb. But anyway, and they're smaller. They get to about 4 foot tall, and they look like dark grey monkeys. They look like they sort of look like a reptile monkey, but they're a future human. And then there's another one that looks a lot like them, but is brown, with brown, oily skin, eyes that are dark during the day, but that can have like a red sheen at night. 3 ridges across the tops of their skulls that are pronounced.
Sounds an awful like reptilian.
More developed than the other one, with these sort of 3 ridges. And they have, again, the 4 fingers with the big claws.
So is that what people are mistaken for, I guess, reptilian? Like
maybe. One of the
see, what I saw... Well, I'll get back to what I saw in a moment. We have to do a station ID.
We do. And I'm in so much in the dark, I have to leave this down here. What a night. Good gosh. Gosh, oh my gosh, Charlie Brown, seriously. What a night. We are live right now on 105.3 FM radio in New Orleans, and we're streaming on YouTube if you're watching us on UFO Paranormal International Public Radio and UFO Gods and Extraterrestrials Radio, and all of our Facebook group pages, as well, of course, the Outer Realm page and Canada's Most Haunted page. Huge thanks to award-winning. Oh my gosh, do you know that I completely forgot to say you're listening to the Outer Realm? I'm just
it's a good thing it's on the ticker.
Gobsmacked by this entire show. Seriously, a huge thanks. Yeah, a huge thanks to award-winning composer Dr. Snick, the Sonic Surgeon, aka Justin Snicker, for our fabulous intro and outro. You can purchase his music on Amazon and Bandcamp, and you can find him on social media, Facebook and Instagram, and you can basically hear him on any streaming platform that you listen to. Dr. Snick, the Sonic Surgeon, and of course, these guys here. Without them, we wouldn't even be here from day one to, we hope, forever. Thank you so much, Folgers Coffee. You guys are amazing. Without your support, we wouldn't even have the Outer Realm right now. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes. And I'm sorry about that. Wow. I'm just like in shock over all of this. I didn't know there was that much information on tall whites.
Well, a lot of it, it's up to the individual. On listening to me, looking at my YouTube channel, maybe reading my books, up to them how compelling they find my arguments and my research and my own experiences. Because a lot of this is new, like from the point of view of, UFO lore. Or so when you're saying you haven't heard a lot of this about tall whites, that's because it's not out there. I'm the first person to be talking about it. But then it's up to the individuals, of course, to decide whether or not what I have to say is worthwhile or not. And hopefully people, decide that it is. But
there's a lot of experiences. I think they just have to put 2 and 2 together. Like everything you've described to me tonight, even with these little guys, just sound like if that's the case, they could be getting mistaken as the reptilians so many people speak about. What I saw, like literally right beside me one night in the house, wasn't anything like that. I've had the tall whites, but this guy was almost like, if I had to look at the skin because he was so close, it would almost seem like that of a dolphin or a shark. Yeah. That sort of could have been a suit.
Okay.
Oh yeah,
could have been a suit. Now that I think about it,
yeah, because sometimes there's suits. Some people seeing these cloaking suits say it looks like they're wearing like a scuba diving suit,
like a wetsuit.
Like they're wearing a wetsuit.
Yeah, because that's what it looked like to me.
Yeah.
It had a bit of a shine to it, but if I had to touch it, almost like little pores, almost like because I've been up close to both sharks and to dolphins, and I'm thinking, it was close enough to touch, so it was close enough to see.
Oh, wow. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, so those 3, yeah, for sure. That's right. Reptilians, in my opinion, are some kind of like the idea of reptilians is a misidentification of a few different races in possible situations and presenting themselves in different ways. And tall whites in these what I call boas suits are named after Antonio Villas Boas from the 1950s, his case where there were these dark suits as well. But sometimes them maybe, or sometimes some of these other ones that have scaly skin and claws. And also, you know, when people say small greys, well, because the tall whites, which are the same thing as tall greys, really, because they take such a long time to grow, they can be 4 foot tall and be 20 years old. 5 foot tall, like 50, 60 years old. And so they're adults, but still be quite short. And sometimes they're being called short greys, but they're tall whites or tall greys. So these 4 races have given rise to like a plethora of different characters and races in ufology or UFO internet folklore. But as far as I'm concerned, stemming from a genuine, true physical nuts and bolts, flesh and bone 4 races.
So what do you say when you have people like, for example, Paul Hillier, who was our retired Canadian Minister of Defense, who said there was like 160 different races out there. You know, do they know something that everybody else doesn't know, or it's just documentation, like, and nobody's really knows for sure?
Well, I mean, if that's the case, well, that's lovely. I mean, I like that'd be a lovely thing for there to be all of these, you know, advanced races from different systems zipping around our skies and visiting us and all that kind of stuff. I personally doubt it very much. But if it were the case, that would be terrific. But with Paul Hallier saying there's 100 and something different races, a lot of these people become victims of counterintelligence initiatives of large scales. Paul Hallier very well could be, his contacts very well could be feeding
rest
him.
In peace, by the way. Sorry, I should have said that.
Sorry?
He passed. Yeah, I just want to say, like,
rest in peace.
R.I.P. there. Yeah, so just recently.
I didn't realize that. Was
it's relatively soon. Yeah.
Okay. Rest in peace. He may have been subjected to this kind of thing. I think a lot of major figures in ufology, ufologists, researchers, even experiencers, they can be targeted and be influenced by individuals in the community that may be trying to feed them disinformation. Now, having said that, one doesn't need to be as paranoid as that to understand that human beings are storytelling people, that we're prone to searching for complexity that isn't necessarily there. If we don't quite have all the answers, fabricating wonderful narratives and inventing, you know, all of these taxonomies of beings of all different sizes and shapes and descriptions to fill a new myth, a folklore. Now it's based on a reality. It's based on empirical world of genuine, true races that exist, but it's gotten a bit out of control, in my opinion. And but they are there and they're real and they're still here. You know, and anyone can communicate with them. And if you are the kind of person who thinks that your house is haunted, you're a real contender for already being a genuine, perhaps Mudgeonah tall white experiencer and not knowing it. And you can reach out to them and say to them, hey, dudes, are you this? Maybe I know what you are. Try and get some kind of electronic voice phenomena happening with them, or leaving some messages for them, or asking them changes in the environment.
They do not want to show themselves, that's for sure, because then all of that, they just won't. And then you're inviting, in a way, a communication. So if you're getting all of this phenomenon, like some people really get terrorized by it, or they're really fearful of it. And if you're initiating this communication, it may not necessarily work in your favor. If they're, let's say, if you have an aggressive bunch with you.
Yeah, well,
scratches, right? Bruises, pushing, which could be poltergeist,
or demons. We want to encourage conversation and engage with demons.
Unless these are the demons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I personally I'm of the opinion that they respect bravery, and they respect the
Okay.
idea that you are in a human to human manner, because they are humans, the kind of,
Right.
they're, I don't know what you want to call them, Homo orionis or whatever.
Right.
Homo sapiens orionis maybe as a separate subspecies, not a fully separate species,
Right.
maybe, depending. But they, I don't think they behave very well, or they can have a dry sense of humor as well, and they can be quite mean if they sense that someone is afraid, in the sense that they can make fun of a person if the person seems to be a little bit unsure of themselves, a bit afraid, which is not a nice thing to be doing, but they seem to respect confrontations
And authority.
and
Oh,
authority. Yeah.
Authoritative.
okay.
So I would suggest, and you guys obviously are not quite on the same page with this, and maybe you won't want me to be recommending this to your audience, but I would recommend personally initiating contact with the Majina. I think everybody should be doing this.
If it's a tall white, yeah, it's a little bit of a different
Yeah.
situation. So you have to understand, when you're dealing with somebody who's been brought up old school with religion, to them it's a demonic. So you
This is
have to,
true.
in a way, you have to work with that mindset. You're thinking, no, you don't want to initiate conversation with this, because, like, unless you can change what goes on up here, it's really difficult to convince them. Yeah. Strike up a conversation, and they're thinking, I don't know. This may not
It's
be
a hard one, but you would
hard.
know that if it fought back, because you're saying it respects confrontation.
It's true.
Demonics don't,
But
in
it
our
makes
minds.
sense, because
Yeah.
when you show authority, then you don't have the same issues. Now, unless they feel challenged, then it's a little bit different. They get their backup. But it's not just, when you hold your ground, they seem to back off. So that makes sense also.
Yeah.
But
it depends, I
unfortunately,
think.
too many
Sorry.
mindsets. Yeah, too many
This
old
is
school
true.
mindsets.
Yeah, lots of what I would think were old-fashioned worldviews.
How do you change that? That's the thing. We're getting into the
I don't
new
know.
age, right?
I don't know if you can in the end. I mean, I suppose, if someone has a certain belief system, and I'm not quite sure, and they're, an older person, and this is the nature of reality to them. This is the way they divide up reality, interpret reality. There's either good and evil, and there's nothing in between. And is this an angel? Is this a demon?
People can
and I'm not
accept
quite
demonic. They can't accept ET for some reason.
right. And if you say, look, what about there's a third kind of non-human entity that's not an angel or a demon? How about that? And if that's not in their belief system, you're right. That's
I
very
like
difficult.
that. I like how you worded that, though.
I always say to people after we've worked with them, I'll send them an email. So how do you feel about extraterrestrials? Oh, we've had experiences. Okay, then. But then you get those like, oh, no. It's like, okay,
Right.
you kind of learn where to tread, or whether or not to tread.
Yes, yeah. You have to read different
I
people.
believe in them. I just don't believe that I've had an experience with them. But I do believe, I don't believe that we're the only people in the universe. I mean, that is just ridiculous. But I don't, unless I'm being scrubbed, I don't believe it. Yeah, I know. I agree with that as well. I do see the evidence there there's proof. There's a lot of proof. And when you have government speaking up, that's another thing. But I do believe in demons, and I do believe in angels, and I do believe in other beings. But we are taught that ETs are superior to us. Maybe that's why people are afraid to communicate.
Right.
Where demonics are lower level, right? And they could be, to someone who's Catholic, they, burned right out with holy water. What do you do with an ET?
Yeah, which brings me to another question. Exactly what, like Amelia made a good point. We're taught certain things, that ET is superior to us, and we should maybe, like, even Stephen Hawking said, oh no, we shouldn't be sending signals out into space. We shouldn't be connecting. Then there's this fear of, the American false flag sort of thing. What do you say to that? How do you, I think for the most part, people seem to be relaxing a little bit about extraterrestrials and UAPs, UFOs. People have a camera phone, you're catching things. But this propaganda in media, I think, is working against trying to coexist or connect in a positive manner. So what's your thoughts on that? This whole, false flag propaganda, don't connect.
Yeah. Well, I suppose it's in the best interest of some people that are up there running the show behind curtains and things to keep people afraid and unsure and alienated. And,
Nice.
and
that's a dad joke,
sure.
but okay.
Damn.
Yeah.
And that's I think I personally think I know a lot of people are against the guy, and I'm not against the guy really. I think he's probably kind of a necessary evil of Lou Elizondo and his kind of thing coming out, where if there's drip-fed disclosure, which is sort of what he's sort of the face, in my opinion, of what is drip-fed disclosure. Where already there's been an admission from the Pentagon that these things are real. I mean, that is disclosure in itself. 20 years ago, people would have said disclosures happened. But it's almost like now that that's been disclosed, that the Pentagon, yes, these things are real, but we don't know what they are. They may be ET, but they may not be.
Fear.
And they've just left it at that for now.
Right.
That's almost like it's the first drop coming out of the feeder.
Right.
And there'll be more drips, but it's slow. Like they don't want to disrupt cultures, religious systems, economies, and all this kind of stuff.
Some religious systems are economies.
Yeah, well, that's true.
We'll leave it there.
Lou Elizondo, I think, is the face of that, and it's like people have redefined what disclosure needs to be now, so that now that there is this kind of disclosure. I mean, the American government is admitting that UFOs are real and they've been researched.
They're showing those little TikTok things, and you can pick up your camera phone and go, not a TikTok, but much better.
Oh, right, yeah.
What is that? But again, it's fear-based.
Well, I mean, if
they
were real,
aircraft carriers were under attack. Like it's that projection.
Well, yeah, I suppose, but in the end, like in my opinion, for disclosure, like a lot of people aren't going to believe disclosure unless military, unless defense, say, the Defense Department treats it seriously and treats it as a potential threat. No one's going to believe it anyway, and if they don't, people will say, hold on a sec, you're telling us aliens are real, right? And you're not treating it as you'd normally treat a situation with another group of people. Why are they special? Why aren't you presuming there may be a possibility of a threat? If you don't, then a lot of people, I think, will come out, because there's just lots of people with interesting ideas in the world, of course, and say, hold on a sec, the American government is saying they're ETs and they're all benign. What's their agenda? Surely some of them aren't. Have the ETs already taken over our government? Why isn't the defense DOD interested in this? Why aren't they suggesting there's a possible threat and it's being considered as a potential threat and all this kind of stuff? So you got these two things. Okay. I think it's happening exactly the way it has to happen. Otherwise, it will disrupt our world too much, and also people wouldn't believe it unless there was unless the defense industries and defense and army and military were a little bit agitated by it and behaving, even if it's pretense, they need to pretend that there's a possibility of a threat.
Right. Otherwise, well, it generates money for the military also, right? So it's like
money for the military, of course. Yeah.
Sure. Which
if keeps the Republicans in power.
If we can back up 1 quick minute, can these tall whites step in because this is a big conspiracy theory, that they just step into, all these world leaders and, okay, we're going to get the job done the way we see fit. And you see, like, can they step in? Can their essence step into a human physical body? Can they exist in it? Or is this just really a theory that is just way too far out there?
Well, the way I look at it, which is pretty boring, And it sounds like I'm a materialist, but the tall whites are their technologies appear as magic, and they appear as being incredibly spiritually advanced and non-physical.
Right.
But it's all based on robust technologies, way beyond our understandings. They can or could theoretically take over a person's mind and possess them.
Okay, there we go.
And just have them physically doing everything that they're suggesting to them, mesmerize them. They certainly have the possibility, the potential. They've done that to me in the sense of sometimes controlling me.
Like a possession.
Like a possession, and my mind clouding over, and then I find myself standing up and going and doing things that I'm not quite sure why I'm doing them. And it's often when they've been talking to me, when they're visited and they're talking to me, then when they're talking to each other, suddenly I'll find myself just standing there and staring at a wall. Or another interesting thing, wandering over and taking objects and lining them up and piling them on top of each other until they're ready to,
like stacking.
Like an obsessive compulsive thing or something. Like my mind state's so dumbed down and gone to some weird place. That's how I'm functioning until they're ready to talk to me again, and then all of a sudden I'm back.
Do you ever get emotional? Like sometimes when they talk to you, do you get really emotional when they communicate with you? Really?
Early on, I was incredibly afraid. When I was
emotional in an overwhelmed way, like, oh my God, like just really heartfelt, overwhelming, emotional.
Yes, but it's sort of like it's a part of the communication process is sort of like that, where they seem to have, like I was saying before, their emotions change so quickly, and they're communicating almost through emotions as well as through abstract ideas, and also in a linguistic kind of way, where it's like English as a silent voice, sometimes obviously masculine, sometimes obviously feminine, or sometimes neutral. A silent voice in my mind that's sort of like the voice you'd have when you're reading, silent reading or something, like a person's voice, but it's intrusive, not mine. And also a weird thing is that it's almost like I can feel the sound of the words, like they're physical somehow, like the sounds are three-dimensional and expressed much faster than a person could utter a sentence. Like if I just said, I am sitting in a room here, that sentence took a certain amount of time to express. In their kind of communication, that whole sentence would have been expressed linguistically, but in a fraction of that time. Like it's dumped into your mind like a packet.
Super quick
information.
Yeah.
But the possession thing, you could call it possession maybe, or like enchantment or something maybe you could call it. They're capable of doing that kind of thing for sure.
And it's just making that connection, again with the mindset, the religious mindset of people, which they will call possession, like it's like a step in, but it's more of a mind thing from what you're saying, not a jumping into the person
mind,
kind of thing.
Well, technology,
like
exactly. Yeah, I don't know how they are doing this. Like on a technological level, I'm not quite sure how they are projecting information into your head in some kind of non-physical way, like some kind of well, I suppose it's physical. It's just some kind of
the same way they could
throw
it's
a
voice.
Not tangible. It's intangible. Sorry,
they're throwing energy, throwing a voice, throwing
energy,
thoughts, maybe.
Yeah. Do you think maybe our pineal gland, when they're always looking for, you look back in ancient civilizations, you always see the third eye sort of thing. Do you think that's what we use when we're telepathically communicating with ETs?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe I don't know enough about that to
Neither do I. That's why I asked you.
Yeah, it's very sacred in some cultures, like the Egyptians especially. So there's got to be something to
there has to be something to it, right?
And they're relying on their technologies in their helmets to be communicating with you in those kinds of ways, but you don't have to be wearing a helmet,
right?
In the sense that as long as they're wearing it, they can, and as long as they're within a certain distance,
because
be doing this, and if they can communicate with each other as well, both wearing helmets. If you're in the vicinity, you can hear them talking to each other. They might be able to switch that off and have it so you can't. I'm not quite sure how that works, but certainly I've been in their vicinity where tall white individuals are communicating with each other, and that can become overwhelming in an emotional kind of way because there can be echoing. So what you get is it's sort of, I've called it like an umbrella of thought where everything in the area, they're talking to each other, they're thinking something, the other person's thinking about what they thought and then responding. You're thinking about what they're thinking and sending it back to them, their own thoughts that then can be echoed and sent back to you. And then it can become overwhelming if there's this repetition of people thinking about other people's thoughts.
For me, I just heard the communication, like verbal, blah, 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 and I'm just oh my God. I think it's just because you are in awe of the communication itself.
Yeah, that's right. Well, it's overwhelming. I've sort of gotten a bit used to it, but it is overwhelming. But there can also, I think they said to me, which is part of dealing with this, don't think in English, don't think in Gaelic or whatever language you speak. And they say, don't think in a language because we'll hear it twice. They say they've already, and you can just go to articulate something to them and they will have already gotten it. So you could just say, you're thinking, I'm going to tell this guy to have a seat over here. I'm going to offer this guy a seat. And they've already gone, already know what you're
already sitting, going, thank you. Yeah.
And if you say it again, it's just like if you say it in your head as well, again, it's just like an echo. And then they're thinking about your thought, which can echo back. And then you're thinking about them, thinking about your thought. And you have to sort of, it takes some discipline. I think people get more and more used to it. And Charles Hall talked about this in his Millennial Hospitality books, which I recommend people buy if they've never heard of them. Millennial Hospitality. I think there's 6 books now.
Wow.
I'm a fan of the first 5, not so much the 6th one. So, but the first 5 for sure. And if you just want to sort of read one of his books, because there's so many of them, and get an idea about what he's on about, I'd recommend just buying the 4th book, which is if you're sort of testing the waters to see whether you really want to invest in all of his books. Recommend buying his 4th book first, because he sort of goes back and covers a lot of stuff he did in the first 3 books, but in a condensed sort of way. And then if you're interested, I recommend going back and buying the 3 books before it, because there's a lot more detail, a lot more of it.
Right.
The 4th book is called After Hours, I think. But he talks about that in his books a lot, being overwhelmed by their thoughts, them talking to each other and hearing it, and what that felt like to him. He talked, like when I discovered Charles Hall, because I've been having these experiences, trying to work out what was happening.
Right.
When I found Charles Hall and read his books, I was like, these are my dudes. It's exactly the same, the chirping, whistling, barking languages, the same kind of thought intrusions, the way he described that his mind would cloud over when they wanted to control him, or and missing time, which is of course typical classic Close Encounter stuff. But and their appearance as well, and then they grow and keep growing. Well, I've seen individuals up to 9 foot tall, 8 foot, maybe 9 foot tall, in long floor length hooded cloaks. Their priests wear really groovy looking cloaks. And so do the little ones.
Tells me psychedelic.
The little brown ones that are called Sabetina, the little brown ones that are their allies, they call little brothers or Sabetina. They wear cloaks, hooded cloaks and robes and things too. And if people have ever had an experience where they thought they saw the Grim Reaper in their room,
say that.
Right.
Yeah.
A white, long, skeletal face with a
that's them.
Pronounced chin, huge eyes, hooded, and with them some kind of demonic entity. It looks like it has a wrinkly face, two beings in hoods and robes.
Think that one over, Wayne.
Hey, sorry.
No, Wayne Mallows had a story about a Grim Reaper, and I'm just thinking maybe
it might have been this guy. Yeah. Okay, sorry to interrupt.
Sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
So that's them.
These are the allied beings. These are the 2 races that I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure are the only 2 left. So,
wow.
And I know a lot of people aren't going to want to hear that, or they'll disagree immediately, or that's all fair enough, whatever. But this is what I've come to understand, there were 4 impinging on our world and influencing us, but 2 of them are no longer here, and 2 of them are still here, and they're close allies. And one's called, they call themselves Madjana. I don't know what that means in their language. And they call the little ones Sabetina. And I think the Sabetina in their own language call themselves Sabichi, but I'm not sure about that. But certainly the tall whites call the little browns, or the brownies, maybe.
Right, little brownies.
Sabetina.
Right.
And they're closely allied, and they're both trying to work out and help each other fix their genomic issues, where their DNA is unraveling and impoverished. Both of them joined forces in a joint initiative to go into their ancient past. The little brown ones from Reticulum they're originally from Earth, but they'd left Earth at different stages. Reticulum and the tall whites from Al-Nilam, the middle star in Orion's belt, came together around 52,000 years in the future, returned to, found each other, tried to alleviate each other's genetic issues, couldn't, and so decided to make this mutual decision to basically come back and use us as free-range archaic humans.
Great.
So there you go.
Great. Yeah. Well, after a while, you get a little too old to reproduce. So it makes it hard. You can't be carrying babies. You don't have the parts, and do they? I guess just as we slowly get towards the end of the show, do they ever give you messages that they would like you to relay to the world? Basically, what are their hope for us? What would they like to see?
Yeah. Well, I mean,
No
when
pressure.
I was camping, sorry,
no pressure.
That's okay. When I was camping in the Dandenong Ranges in Victoria, in Belgrave Forest National Park, huge eucalypts, mountain, what are called mountain ash. They're not a real ash tree. Europeans, when they came to Australia, used the names of European trees for all of the flora that's here, and it's very confusing. But they're not actually ash trees, but we call them mountain ash. It's giant, the largest flowering plant in the world. They're not quite as big as your redwoods, but they're not far off it. They're giants, 300 foot tall and things like that.
Beautiful.
So I was camping in the forest with these because I just love those trees in a place called Belgrave, and had experience where I had missing time. I was on my own in a tent, missing time. Saw what now I suppose I'd call orbs. At the time I didn't know what to call them, moving through the trees, these blue orbs, and like that's when I started first experiencing sort of like telepathic communication, stuff like that. But I'd been heavily interested in neo-paganism, like Wicca and Druidry and things like that at the time. Incredibly interested in the Celtic fairy faith because I felt that the beings that I'd been interacting with from a child were Celtic elves or fairies or something like that. So that's what made me learn Gaelic and all that kind of stuff as well. But so at this stage, I would have been about 21. And when I'd gone into the forest camping, I said, I think there's elves here. Are you elves? And I was initiating contact. And then they were saying, who are you? Why are you here? And then they were saying, we'll hold you to this bargain, because I was saying to them, like I'd help them out. Basically, I was sort of offering my services as a druid or whatever I thought I was at the time, as a shaman or whatever, Yeah. And then years later, when I started moved back to where I grew up and started having much more powerful encounters, real encounters, flesh and blood encounters with these guys, they said, are you ready to keep up the bargain? And I was like, oh, right, okay, so you're the same dudes.
Right, great.
I was sort of confused how many entities were involved and all that kind of stuff. But there's this continuity all the way through of the tall white. Now, so then it was about the book. So I wrote my book and I said to them, why don't you just write it yourselves and use a pseudonym? Like, why would you use some weird little Australian dude? And they're like, oh, you're going to humanize the message. We have to do it this way.
That's true. I could see that.
And so I was like, okay, fair enough. So So the book, or the books, plural, as I sort of go along, write another one, more than another one, hopefully, is them helping me find cases. So I'd like to take credit for some of it. I don't want them to sort of like for me to completely lose anything. But I think, here and there I've sort of like put things together and made connections and things like that. But a lot of it is them guiding me to certain things, they want people to know what they are, and they want people to be shown through different cases, through history, who they are, represented through different experiences. And so in my book, I build what I call the CT profile, a compendium of characteristics, cryptoterrestrial profile, building up elements of language, appearance, habitation, technologies, and showing them, revealing them through different cases, through history, up to modern times, and especially like the Chris Bledsoe and the Fayetteville incident is very typical of these guys, tall, white interaction. Even though he himself doesn't necessarily think that. So they want people to know about them. People have known about them in the past. Like if you look into, they've been called lots of different things, but, the Celtic fairy faith of Europe, to pick one older, culture, they didn't think of them as angels or demons necessarily, but another race of people really that were magically advanced, that was subterranean dwelling. And not to graze your cattle too close to their habitations or they'll be butchered, or not to attack any of them or be too aggressive towards them, or you'd find yourself in real trouble. To placate them, that they could be invisible at any stage, they could be there amongst you and you wouldn't know, so not to offend them, not to speak ill of them, and all these kinds of things. And they're a very proud race for sure, now, and they can be offended and things like that, But so this is where as well cattle mutilations come in. Some cattle mutilations may be sort of like attempts by some kind of shadow government or black ops to sort of obscure.
I've heard that.
What's going on in the world. Yes. It's sort of like just counterintelligence and counter missions, so that people really don't know what to make of anything, But certainly some cattle mutations, and also particularly dog deaths, domesticated dogs with their throats slit, are them, because they're very frightened of dogs. And if you're in a situation where you have aggressive and malicious intent, and let's say you've bought a ranch near one of their underground habitations, and you are a kind of rancher. Sorry?
Skinwalker.
Yeah, if you're the kind of rancher that has dogs, has firearms, can be aggressively motivated, perhaps has ideas and designs on hunting in the forest nearby, setting traps, anything like that, they're going to launch a psychological warfare against you and your family to get you out. And they'll do it by trying to make you think you're crazy, speaking into your mind, shadow people manifestations, showing you their boa suits with the glowing red eyes, making themselves invisible, making themselves appear again, playing tricks on you by taking your frying pan off the kitchen bench and putting it in the freezer.
Trying to make you mad.
Pushing you, shoving you, scratching you, because they want you out. And the next family that moves in may be more agreeable to them, because they... now, part of the cattle mutilations is definitely psychological warfare. And people say, hold on a sec, is it, they're using the pieces for something, maybe they're experimenting on the cows and things like that. Maybe some of that goes on as well, but the primary drive for mutilating cattle is to destroy the livelihood of people that are living in places they don't want them to be. And also they disapprove of the animal husbandry, animal industry anyway.
That
because
makes sense.
Right.
And there's this kind of, also they have this kind of thing as well where, it sounds like it's this kind of discrepancy where they say they're prepared to kill humans if they're threatening them. They're going to slash your dog's throat if it's attacking them or their children.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to kill your cattle. But at the same time, they're vegans and they don't.
Why would they harm
animals and they don't
animals?
wear
Yeah,
animals.
it doesn't make any sense.
And
But
they
it
don't
makes
keep pets. They don't keep pets. They think that we're weird for doing that we have in our cultural life, that we have animals that we keep them and we treat like little inferior humans or something like that. But I mean, that we love, obviously, and all that kind of stuff. But the way they see it is that they sort of don't understand. They appreciate and respect all life forms and biodiversity, but they also don't want to have anything to do with animals, which sounds like a contradiction. And also they're prepared to use domesticated animals, which they consider to be an abomination in the first place, that have been bred for their flesh and kept in inhumane conditions, as far as they see it. They'll use those animals, which they consider even a mercy, take their lives in a way that's more humane than we probably will eventually, to make a point. But in the end, they don't want animal agriculture at all. They don't want us to be doing that either.
Wow. Wow.
I just have to say, my dog is superior to me.
I was going to say, yeah.
Right now, okay?
My kids go, you like the dogs better than us. What?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
Not at all. No. So, no.
We have, as part of our cultural makeup, and we pass it on from generation to generation, ways of treating animals to have them as extensions of ourselves to perform different tasks, to hunt for us or defend our property, and this kind of thing. They don't, whereas the Mudgeonah or tall whites or Ryans, they don't resort to training animals. If they want to control an animal, they will just, you could say, possess it or manipulate its mind and send it away, project fear into its mind. Or they do that to us as well, to expel us from places that it want us. All of a sudden we'll feel visceral fear and we'll turn away and leave. Yeah, in the end, it's there seems to be apparent contradictions, but in the end, it's about them appreciating animals, but not wanting them in their world necessarily. They don't understand them quite.
But some of them, like dogs and cats, need to be watched over by us to live longer and to thrive.
They do, yeah, and they were wolves. We've interfered in there by artificial selection. We have interfered with natural selection, and we have made these beings that require us. If like you hear it said sometimes, I suppose it's probably the truth, that if humans were to suddenly disappear, that it would only take a very short period of time for domesticated dogs to return to something more like a wolf, because through natural selection, because the little ones would be killed off almost straight away.
You're going to make me cry and have nightmares. Stop it. True. I got one sitting on my foot right now because he has an ear infection.
Well,
those dogs that are more aggressive would take over and all that kind of stuff.
No, he'll run and hide behind my legs. Like, he's not aggressive.
Well, we are, of course, at the end of the show. So this is the part. Oh, I know. I hate it. So we'll just have to do it again. That's what I say.
It's a good number. 11:11.
We will. We'll do it. Dang it.
It's going to talk about Spring Hill Jack, but we'll do that another time.
We're going to bring you back because there's so much we didn't get back to that. We could just keep going, of course. So tell everybody how to find you, and that's how we'll end off.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Okay. So I have a YouTube channel. I don't have a social media presence other than just having a YouTube channel. And it's just my name, Ryan Musgrave Evans. So I put like spiels and vlogs and things on there, maybe once a week, maybe sometimes a little bit longer.
Nice.
And so, yeah, people can check that out. And if people want to contact me, go to the About section on my YouTube channel, and you'll find my email address under business inquiries. And just, if you've got any questions or you have your own experiences you want to talk about and things like that, then would be very welcome to hear from people. And my book, Children of Orion, Finding the Crypto-Terrestrials, that's currently available. It's on Amazon. as paperback, hardcover, and ebook. The plans to make it an audio book have fallen through, unfortunately.
Oh,
There was
very
a
nice.
gentleman that was going to do it,
Right.
and then something happened. He lost the file. I'm not quite sure what happened.
What figures?
But anyway,
Yeah.
well. There's
So
so many
lovely.
people have been asking me about that and saying it's supposed to come out. When was that coming out? But if those people who have been asking me about that are watching or listening to this, I'm sorry about that. That's fallen through. And then my next book early next year, the next
Right.
book, my publisher, Philip Mantle at Flying Disc Press. I'll just give a
He's
shout out to
awesome.
him.
Oh, yeah, we love
Much
him.
indebted
I
to
like
Phil.
Philip.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Once I
guys.
get off the soundboard
Thank
tonight, I
you.
will email you and I will throw some dates at you because you'll be still awake since it's afternoon for you. So
Yeah, so will we, sadly. But
exactly. So thank you very much for
Thank
joining
you.
us, and I will be in touch. It was a pleasure as
Okay,
always.
thanks, guys.
Okay,
Thank you so
Bye-bye.
much.
Thanks.
Bye.
Wow. Man, oh man, that was just like unbelievable.
That's
So,
great.
unfortunately, we are at the end of another freaking amazing segment, just saying. And big thank you to Ryan for joining us tonight. It was just mind blowing. My gosh, we could have just kept going, and we will, but in another segment. Big thank you to Folgers Coffee for sponsoring us. As always, we love you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Big thank you to Dr. Snick, aka Justin Snicker, for providing us with your music and your voice. Remember, guys, stop by International Public Radio, UFO Paranormal Radio, subscribe, but become a member on UFO Paranormal so you get all the extra content. It's very reasonable, different packages to look at, but lots of fun. If you want to email us, the outer realm contact at gmail.com. It's literally the only way you're going to grab us. So the outer realm contact at gmail.com. Tomorrow night is one of our favorite guest and friend, Mr. Nick Redfern, will be on the show with us. And we're going to be kind of keeping up with the whole theme here. We're going to be discussing his book on Rh negative blood and theories which surround it, which is going to be amazing. This coming Saturday, don't forget Joe and I, yes, we will be on the Gray Zone Uncensored, which is 5 to 7 p.m. Central, 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern. It's only a one-shot deal. You have to be a member of the page the channel, to actually go in and catch any kind of archives. So until then, Amelia and I bid you good night, and we will see you tomorrow night.
You have been listening to The Outer Realm with Michelle DeRoche and Amelia Pisano. Airing live every Wednesday and Thursday evening, 9 to 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 to 10 p.m. Central, on the United Public Radio Network, 105.3 FM in New Orleans.